Ambassador Velthar stood before the great crystal array that would broadcast his message across the entire galaxy. His translucent body shimmered with worry as pale blue light pulsed through his crystalline form. The other Zephyrian Council members watched in silence from their floating platforms. Never before had their peaceful race sent out such a desperate call for help. The recording chamber filled with soft harmony as Velthar began to speak. His voice carried the musical quality that all Zephyrians possessed, but today it trembled with fear. People of the galaxy, I am Ambassador Velthar of the Zephyrian Collective. We have lived in peace for thousands of years. We have never raised weapons against another species. We have shared our knowledge, our art, and our crystal harmonics with all who would listen. Today, we face extinction. The holographic display behind him showed images of destruction. Massive dark ships hung over beautiful crystal cities like storm clouds. Green energy beams turned elegant spires into molten slag. Zephyrian civilians fled through streets that sparkled like diamonds as their world burned around them. The Krumnari Empire has invaded our space. They want our crystal worlds to make weapons. We tried to negotiate. We offered them trade agreements, cultural exchanges, anything they desired except our destruction. They answered with more ships and more death. On the other side of the galaxy, the message reached the great trading hub of Nexus Station. Merchants from dozens of species paused their business to watch. Most shook their heads sadly. The Krumnari were known throughout the galaxy as ruthless conquerors. Their military was vast and their technology advanced. Few dared to stand against them. Captain Thrax of the Mantari Defense Force watched the broadcast with his crew. His insect-like features clicked with concern. "The poor crystals," he said in his buzzing voice. "But what can anyone do? The Krumnari have 500 battle cruisers. We have 20. Similar conversations happened across countless worlds. The Peaceful Aquatic Alliance expressed sympathy, but claimed their water-filled ships could not operate in crystal world environments. The proud Avarian Republic offered to evacuate some civilians, but refused direct military intervention. The ancient ethereal collective meditated on the problem and decided it was not their fight. Back on the Zephyrian homeworld, Velthar continued his plea. "We know that war is terrible. We know that many of you have your own problems. But the Krumnari will not stop with us. They never do. They take and take until there is nothing left. Today it is our world's. Tomorrow it might be yours." The message reached Earth 3 days later. The small blue planet sat quietly in its corner of the galaxy, largely ignored by the major powers. Humans had only joined galactic society 50 years ago, and most species still considered them primitive newcomers. Admiral Sarah Chen sat in her office aboard the space station Terra Prime, reading reports from across human space. At 45, she had gray streaks in her black hair and scars from the colony wars that had made her famous. When the Zephyrian message appeared on her screen, she watched it twice. "Sir," her aide, Lieutenant Rodriguez, stood at attention near her desk. "Should we forward this to the Galactic Council's military committee?" Chen leaned back in her chair. She had met a Zephyrian diplomat once at a trade conference. The crystal being had been fascinated by human music, spending hours listening to classical symphonies with an expression of pure joy. They were gentle people who had never hurt anyone. "How many ships do we have ready for deployment?" she asked. Rodriguez checked his tablet. "The third fleet is finishing training exercises. 47 ships, including the new carriers. The fifth fleet is on patrol near the Titan colonies. 38 ships. Why do you ask, sir?" Chen stood and walked to the window that looked out at Earth. The planet turned slowly below them, blue and white and green. From here it looked peaceful. Most aliens who visited thought it was beautiful. They did not know how dangerous it truly was. "Send a message to Fleet Command," she said. "Tell them we are responding to the Zephyrian request for aid." "Full deployment, sir." Rodriguez's voice cracked slightly. "The Krumnari Empire? They have hundreds of ships. We would be outnumbered 10 to 1. Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Lieutenant, do you remember what happened when the hegemony tried to invade the Mars colonies?" "Yes, sir. We destroyed their entire invasion force." "How many ships did they have?" "Nearly 100, sir." "And how many did we have?" Rodriguez swallowed hard. 12, sir. Good memory. Send the message and prepare a response to the Zephyrians. Within hours, the human response reached Zephyrian space. It was short and simple, transmitted in Admiral Chen's calm voice. "We hear you. Help is coming." Velthar and the other council members gathered around their communication array. The message confused them. They had hoped for offers of aid, promises of supply convoys, maybe diplomatic pressure on the Krumnari. This sounded almost casual. "Who are these humans again?" asked Council Member Lithara, her crystal form flickering with uncertainty. "They are a young species from the Outer Rim," Velthar replied. "They joined the galactic community recently. Their world is listed as... Let me check. Class 12. The council chamber fell silent. Class 12 worlds were marked as uninhabitable death traps. Nothing intelligent was supposed to evolve on such planets. "There must be an error in the records," whispered Council Member Zenthak. Meanwhile, the Krumnari High Command intercepted the human message. General Vorthak, a massive reptilian being with scarred hide and cybernetic implants, laughed when he heard it. His officers joined in the cruel sound that echoed through the command ship's bridge. "Humans?" Vorthak's voice was like grinding stone. "I looked them up. They come from some backwards rock at the edge of nowhere. Primitive ape descendants who only discovered spaceflight a few centuries ago. How many ships are they sending?" His intelligence officer, a thin creature with pale skin and huge black eyes, checked his reports. "Approximately 80 ships, General. Mixed classes, but all small by our standards." Vorthak's laughter grew louder. 80 ships? Against our 1,000? This will be amusing. We will crush these humans first, then finish the crystals. Perhaps their defeat will discourage others from answering such calls for help. The general turned to his fleet commanders. "Prepare the border squadrons. When these humans arrive, I want them destroyed quickly. Make sure the galaxy sees what happens to those who oppose the Krumnari Empire." Across the galaxy, news of the human response spread quickly. Most species that heard it felt pity for the humans. They were clearly naive about galactic politics and Krumnari military power. Some traders began placing bets on how long the human fleet would last. The most optimistic gave them 3 hours after arrival. On Earth, Admiral Chen stood before the assembled crews of the 3rd and 5th fleets. Thousands of men and women filled the massive hangar bay of Terra Prime. They came from every continent of Earth, representing dozens of nationalities and backgrounds. What united them was their heritage as children of humanity's dangerous homeworld. "People," Chen's voice carried clearly through the bay's speakers. "We have received a call for help. A peaceful species faces extinction from bullies who think strength means taking whatever they want. We are going to show them that strength means protecting those who cannot protect themselves." Cheers erupted from the assembled crews. These were people whose ancestors had survived ice ages and volcanic winters, plagues and wars, floods and famines. They were the children of a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. They were ready for a fight. Admiral Chen raised her hand for silence. "The enemy outnumbers us. Their ships are larger. They have been conquering worlds since before humans learned to make fire. None of that matters. We are going to remind the galaxy why you should never threaten someone's family while humans are watching." The fleet began to move. News of the human response traveled through galactic information networks like wildfire. Within days, every major species had heard about the small fleet heading toward Zephyrian space. Most expected it to be a tragic but brief footnote in galactic history. The curious began digging into human records to learn more about these doomed volunteers. Dr. Kelleth Vox, a Mantari xenobiologist, was the first to discover the truth. She sat in her laboratory on Nexus Station, reviewing files from the Galactic Survey Corps. The official report on Earth made her compound eyes widen in disbelief. "This cannot be correct," she muttered, her antennae twitching nervously. She ran the planetary classification scan again. The result remained the same: Class 12 Death World. Kelleth had studied hundreds of worlds throughout her career. She knew the classification system well. Class 1 worlds were paradise planets with perfect temperatures, stable weather, and abundant food. Most galactic species evolved on Class 3 or 4 worlds at worst. Class 12 was supposed to be impossible for complex life. She read the atmospheric analysis. The oxygen percentage was toxic to most species. The gravity was crushing. The planet suffered regular ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and magnetic pole reversals. Weather patterns included massive storms that could destroy entire cities. The surface was covered with predators, diseases, and plants that could kill with a touch. "How did anything intelligent evolve there?" she whispered. Her research partner, Professor Quellen from the Peaceful Aquatic Alliance, floated in his environmental tank nearby. His jellyfish-like form pulsed with curiosity as he reviewed his own findings. "Kelleth, you need to see this biological data." Quellen's voice bubbled through his tank's speakers. "The human physiology reports are disturbing." "Disturbing how?" "Their bones are dense as stone. Their muscles can operate at efficiency levels that would tear apart most organic tissue. Their cardiovascular system can function under pressures that would burst our circulatory networks. And their nervous system," as Quellen paused. "Their nervous system is designed for constant combat readiness." Kelleth pulled up the medical files. Human bodies were built like living weapons. Their eyes could track multiple targets simultaneously. Their hearing could detect threats from great distances. Their hands could grip with enough force to crush crystal. Most shocking of all, they healed from injuries that would permanently disable other species. "Look at this combat adaptation data," she said, her voice growing higher with stress. "They can fight effectively while injured. Their adrenaline system actually makes them stronger and faster when threatened. They can function on minimal sleep for days. They can eat almost anything organic without dying." The implications hit both scientists at the same time. Humans had not just survived on a Class 12 death world. They had been forged by it into something unprecedented in galactic biology. Word of their discoveries spread through scientific networks within hours. Research stations across the galaxy began pulling Earth data and coming to the same terrifying conclusion. Humans were not primitive newcomers to galactic civilization. They were evolved apex predators from the most dangerous world anyone had ever encountered. On the Kromnari command ship, General Vorthak received the intelligence reports with growing irritation. His subordinates had been interrupting his meditation with increasingly panicked updates about these humans for the past day. "General," his intelligence chief said nervously, "we have confirmed the Earth classification. It is indeed a Class 12 death world. Our xenobiology experts say the evolutionary pressures there would create what?" Vorthak's voice was a dangerous growl. "Killing machines, sir. Natural-born warriors adapted for constant warfare." Vorthak stood from his command throne, his massive frame towering over his officers. "You expect me to fear some primitives because they come from a dangerous rock? We have conquered Class 8 worlds. We have enslaved species with advanced technology. These humans still use chemical propulsion and kinetic weapons like savages." "Sir, about their weapons," the intelligence chief continued weakly, "we intercepted some of their military broadcasts during transit. They do use kinetic weapons, but not because they lack advanced technology. They use them because they work better in their tactical doctrine." "Explain." "They fight at ranges where energy weapons lose effectiveness. They use physical projectiles that can penetrate most shield systems, and their ships are built to ram targets if necessary." Vorthak laughed, but it sounded forced. "Ramming attacks are suicide tactics." "Not for them, sir. Their ships are built to survive impacts that would destroy our vessels, and their crews can operate under G-forces that would kill our warriors." The general dismissed his officers with an angry wave. Alone in his command chamber, he pulled up tactical reports from previous Kromnari campaigns. His empire had conquered over 200 worlds. They had faced species with superior technology, larger fleets, and desperate courage. None had ever given them serious trouble. But those species had all evolved on civilized worlds. They fought to preserve their comfortable lives. These humans came from a world that had been trying to kill them since they learned to walk upright. On distant Nexus Station, emergency meetings were being called by every major power. The Galactic Council had not seen such urgent gatherings since the last Galactic War 3 centuries ago. Ambassador Thrixt of the Mantari Defense Force stood before the assembled representatives. His usual confident demeanor was replaced by obvious worry. "Fellow beings," he began, his voice clicking with stress, "we have discovered something unprecedented. The humans responding to the Zephyrian crisis are not what they appear to be. Earth classification data has been verified by 12 independent research teams. These beings evolved on a world that should have been impossible for complex life." Murmurs filled the Great Council chamber. Representatives from dozens of species exchanged worried glances. "What does this mean for the current situation?" asked the ethereal collective speaker, her voice like wind chimes. "It means," said Dr. Kelleth Vox from her position at the Science Advisory Panel, "that we may be about to witness the emergence of a species unlike anything in recorded galactic history." Every evolutionary pressure on their homeworld selected for survival traits that would be considered military advantages. You are saying they are a warrior race? This came from the Aquatic Alliance representative. No, Kelleth replied. Warrior races choose combat as a cultural value. These beings had combat chosen for them by evolution itself. They are survivors in the purest sense, and now they are heading toward a war zone. The implications began to sink in. If humans could survive and thrive on a Class 12 death world, what would they do to enemies who threatened others? What kind of warfare would beings fight who had been selected by evolution for survival at any cost? Meanwhile, in Zephyrian space, Velthar and his council received updates from their few remaining outposts. The Kromnari fleet had moved into position around their outer worlds. Surrender demands were being broadcast continuously. The deadline was 72 standard hours. Any word from our human allies? Asked Council Member Lithara. They report they are on schedule, Velthar replied. Whatever that means. How can 80 ships stand against 1,000? Wondered Zenthak. Perhaps they do not intend to fight, suggested Lithara hopefully. Perhaps they bring some diplomatic solution we have not considered. Velthar studied the star charts showing the approaching human fleet. Their formation was unlike anything in galactic tactical doctrine. Instead of the standard battle lines or defensive spheres used by civilized fleets, the humans traveled in loose clusters that seemed to shift and flow like living things. I do not think they are coming to talk, he said quietly. Light years away, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching the stars streak by as her fleet traveled through hyperspace. Her command staff moved efficiently around her, preparing for what would either be humanity's introduction to galactic politics or its funeral. Ma'am, called her tactical officer, we are receiving intelligence updates from our monitoring stations. The galaxy is starting to figure out what Earth really is. Chen nodded. She had expected this. Humans had kept their world's true nature quiet when they first joined galactic society. Most species found the idea of a death world too disturbing to discuss casually. Any change in Kromnari disposition? No, ma'am. They are still treating this as a minor annoyance. General Vorthak has deployed only a small portion of his fleet to intercept us. Chen smiled grimly. That might be their first mistake. How long until we reach the combat zone? 18 hours, ma'am. Good, signal the fleet. It is time to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten someone's family while Deathworlders are watching. The human fleet arrived in Zephyrian space in a way that nobody expected. Traditional galactic warfare followed established patterns. Fleets dropped out of hyperspace in organized formations at safe distances. Commanders exchanged formal challenges and demands for surrender. Battle lines were drawn with mathematical precision. Combat proceeded according to tactical doctrines developed over centuries of civilized warfare. Humans had apparently never read those manuals. The first sign something was different came when sensors across the system detected multiple hyperspace rifts opening simultaneously. Not the single large portal that military fleets normally used, but dozens of smaller tiers in space-time scattered across a volume of space larger than most solar systems. On the Kromnari command ship, General Vorthak watched his tactical display with growing confusion. What are they doing? He growled to his bridge crew. This formation makes no sense. His tactical officer, a nervous creature with too many eyes, studied the readings. Sir, it appears they are emerging from hyperspace while performing evasive maneuvers. That is impossible. No one can navigate during hyperspace transition. Yes, sir, but they appear to be doing it anyway. The human ships began materializing from their rifts in spiraling patterns that defied physics. The UES Indomitable burst into normal space while executing a perfect barrel roll, its escort destroyers following in a synchronized dance that looked more like an air show than a military deployment. Across the system, observers watched in shock as human vessels emerged while spinning, diving, and weaving through three-dimensional space in formations that required split-second timing and reflexes no known species possessed. It was beautiful, terrifying, and completely insane. Admiral Chen stood on her bridge watching the tactical display show her fleet's deployment. Around her, her crew worked with the easy efficiency of people who had trained together for years. The bridge hummed with quiet activity as systems came online and weapons powered up. Fleet deployment complete, Admiral, reported her operations officer. All ships green and ready. Chen nodded and opened a fleet-wide communication channel. When she spoke, her voice was broadcast to every ship in both fleets, as well as to monitoring stations throughout the system. Krumnari forces, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. You are hereby ordered to withdraw from Zephyrian space immediately. This is your only warning. The response from General Vorthak came quickly, his reptilian voice dripping with contempt. Human, you are outnumbered 12-1. Your primitive ships cannot stand against the might of the Krumnari Empire. Surrender now and I will make your deaths quick. Chen's response made her crew smile and sent chills through every other listener in the system. Sorry we're late to the party. Traffic was murder. The casual tone was so unexpected that several Krumnari officers forgot to breathe. Who spoke like that before a battle that would determine the fate of worlds? All ships, Chen continued on her fleet channel. You know the drill. Fast and close. Show these bullies what happens when they pick on someone smaller than them. What happened next redefined galactic warfare. Human ships did not engage at the long ranges favored by civilized species. Instead, they accelerated directly toward the Krumnari battle line at speeds that should have been suicidal. As they closed distance, they began firing kinetic weapons that moved faster than most energy beams. The Krumnari opened fire with their standard plasma batteries, expecting to destroy the primitive human vessels before they could get close enough to matter. The first volleys struck human ships dead on, and the Krumnari officers began to cheer. Then the human ships kept coming. Where plasma fire should have crippled or destroyed targets, the human vessels simply absorbed the damage and continued their attack runs. Their armor was thicker than anyone had expected, and their internal systems were designed to keep functioning even when large sections of the ship were destroyed. How are they still operational? Vorthak demanded as he watched a human destroyer take 3 direct hits and respond by launching a spread of missiles at point-blank range. Sir, their whole construction is unlike anything in our databases, his engineering officer reported. They appear to have built their ships to survive ramming attacks. As if to prove the point, a human cruiser that had lost most of its forward weapons array simply rammed into a Krumnari frigate at full speed. The impact destroyed both ships, but the human crew had evacuated to escape pods seconds before impact, while the Krumnari crew never had time to react. The battle quickly became chaos. Human ships darted between larger Krumnari vessels like fighters, using their superior maneuverability to avoid return fire, while striking at point-blank range. They coordinated their attacks with timing that seemed impossible, striking from multiple angles simultaneously. On distant Zephyrian monitoring stations, Velthar and his council watched the battle with growing amazement. The humans fought like nothing they had ever seen. Where other species treated space combat as a careful chess match played at safe distances, humans turned it into a knife fight. They are insane, whispered council member Lithara. They are ramming ships 10 times their size. Look at their casualty reports, Zenthak said, studying the tactical feeds. They are taking enormous damage, but their crews keep fighting. How do they survive those impacts? Velthar was beginning to understand. He had studied the preliminary reports about Earth that had been circulating through galactic networks. These beings came from a world that had spent millions of years trying to kill them. They had evolved to survive impacts, explosions, and damage that would destroy other species. The tide of battle began to turn when the human carriers deployed their fighter squadrons. The small craft moved through space with an agility that made Krumnari gunners dizzy, trying to track them. They struck in coordinated swarms, concentrating fire on critical systems before darting away faster than point defense could. Respond, General Vorthak watched his tactical display with growing horror as his perfectly organized fleet began to fall apart. Human ships seemed to be everywhere at once, striking from impossible angles and surviving damage that should have been lethal. Sir, his communications officer called out, we are receiving surrender demands from the human fleet. What? Admiral Chen is offering to accept our surrender, sir. Vorthak's roar of rage echoed through the command bridge. The idea that these primitives would offer him terms was beyond insult. Signal all ships. Full attack. I want every human ship destroyed. But as his fleet moved to execute his orders, something happened that no one expected. The human ships began to sing. It started as a low harmonic from the UES Indomitable and spread through the fleet as other ships joined in. The sound was unlike anything in galactic military history. It was not a war cry or battle chant. It was an old Earth song called the Battle Hymn of the Republic, broadcast on all frequencies for everyone to hear. The psychological effect was devastating. Here were beings facing impossible odds, taking massive casualties, and they were singing, not screaming in fear or begging for mercy, but singing with voices full of confidence and joy. Krumnari morale began to crack. These humans fought like they were enjoying themselves. They joked on open channels as their ships exploded around them. They hummed while ramming vessels 3 times their size. They were having fun. The battle reached its climax when Admiral Chen ordered her remaining ships to execute what she called Operation Sledgehammer. The human fleet formed up into a tight wedge formation and charged directly at the Krumnari command ship, Vorthak, watched in disbelief as 80 human vessels, most showing severe battle damage, accelerated toward his flagship like a spear aimed at his heart. His point defense systems fired frantically, destroying ship after ship. But the humans kept coming. The UES Indomitable, its armor scorched black and its forward sections venting atmosphere, struck the command ship's shields at full ramming speed. The impact sent shockwaves through both vessels. As the human ship began to break apart, escape pods launched in perfect formation while the crew transmitted one final message. "Package delivered," came Admiral Chen's voice, broadcast from her escape pod. "Tell your friends the Deathworlders said hello." The UES Indomitable's reactor went critical 3 seconds later, taking the Krumnari command ship with it in a ball of nuclear fire that lit up the entire system. In the sudden silence that followed, the surviving Krumnari ships found themselves facing 18 battered human vessels, and the growing certainty that these insane beings would rather die than surrender. General Vorthak was dead. His command structure was gone. His fleet was scattered and demoralized. Against all logic and military doctrine, 80 primitive ships had defeated a force 10 times their size. The surrender came 20 minutes later. Across the galaxy, monitoring stations and intelligence networks tried to process what they had witnessed. A new power had announced itself to galactic civilization, and it had done so in the most human way possible, by doing the impossible and making it look like fun. The surrender of the Krumnari fleet should have ended the conflict. In any previous galactic war, the loss of command structure and flagship would have meant immediate cessation of hostilities. But the Krumnari Empire had not survived for centuries by giving up easily. 3 days after the battle, Admiral Chen received reports from her surviving ships that Krumnari reinforcements were massing at the edge of Zephyrian space. The defeat had only made them angrier. "Ma'am," reported Commander Jackson from the damaged destroyer UES Defiant, "long-range sensors show at least 300 ships moving toward our position. They're bringing everything they have." Chen floated in the medical bay of the rescue ship UES Mercy, her left arm in a regeneration sleeve, and her face bearing new scars from the command pod evacuation. Around her, human crew members from across the fleet were receiving treatment for injuries that would have killed most galactic species. "Any word from home?" she asked. "Sixth Fleet departed Terra Prime this morning," Jackson replied. "Admiral Reyes sends his regards and says, quote, 'Save some for the rest of us,' unquote." Chen smiled despite her pain. The reinforcements would not arrive for 5 days. Until then, her battered fleet would have to hold the line with whatever they could manage. The real fighting began when Krumnari boarding parties attempted to capture damaged human ships. The enemy had learned that humans were dangerous in space combat, but surely they would be more manageable in close quarters fighting. This proved to be their second major mistake. The first boarding action took place on the crippled human cruiser, UES Thunderbolt. The ship had lost main power and was drifting with minimal life support. Krumnari assault troops breached the hull expecting to find survivors huddled in panic, waiting for rescue. Instead, they found Gunnery Sergeant Maria Santos and her Marines waiting in the dark. Santos had grown up in the slums of São Paulo, where survival meant being tougher than the gangs that ruled the streets. She stood 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed barely 60 kilograms, but she was pure Deathworlder muscle and attitude. The Krumnari boarding party consisted of 12 warriors, each standing over 2 meters tall and equipped with advanced energy weapons and powered armor. They moved through the ship's corridors with confidence, their thermal sensors showing scattered, human life signs throughout the vessel. What their sensors could not show was that humans had been fighting in impossible conditions for their entire evolutionary history. Santos and her team had deliberately shut down life, support in their section of the ship. They operated in hard vacuum, breathing from emergency tanks, moving through corridors filled with floating debris and sparking electrical systems. For them, it was just another day at the office. The first Krumnari trooper died when he stepped around a corner and found Santos waiting with a captured plasma rifle. She had spent the last hour learning how to use Krumnari weapons by examining gear from dead boarders who had tried to breach other sections. "Contact," the trooper managed to shout before Santos put 3 plasma bolts center mass. The powered armor that should have protected him was designed for energy weapon attacks, not point-blank shots from his own side's heaviest infantry weapons. The battle that followed redefined the Krumnari understanding of ground combat. Human Marines moved through the ship like ghosts, using the damaged environment to their advantage. They set traps in collapsed corridors, ambushed patrols from ventilation shafts, and fought hand-to-hand when ammunition ran low. What terrified the Krumnari most was how the humans adapted. When their captured energy weapons overheated, they switched to kinetic firearms that could punch through Krumnari armor like paper. When those ran empty, they used debris as weapons. When separated from their gear entirely, they fought with their bare hands. Corporal Tommy Chen, no relation to the Admiral, killed 3 Krumnari warriors with a piece of broken hull plating, using it like a spear to penetrate weak points in their armor joints. When asked later how he knew where to strike, he shrugged and said, "Same places you'd hit a crab to get the meat out." The boarding action lasted 6 hours. When it ended, all 12 Krumnari assault troops were dead, and Santos still held her ship. Similar scenes played out across the human fleet. Every boarding attempt failed, often catastrophically. Krumnari troops found themselves fighting enemies who thrived in conditions that should have been lethal to any rational being. On the damaged carrier, UES Intrepid, Chief Petty Officer James Okafor turned the ship's gymnasium into a killing field. When Krumnari troops breached the compartment expecting to find terrified civilians, they instead found Okafor bench-pressing debris while his crew used exercise equipment as improvised weapons. "You boys picked the wrong day to skip leg day," he announced before charging a 2-meter-tall Krumnari trooper with a barbell loaded with 200 kilograms of weight. Plates. News of the boarding failures reached the Krumnari reinforcement fleet, causing the first cracks in their legendary discipline. How could primitive beings defeat their elite assault troops in close-quarters combat? The answer came from intelligence reports that most Krumnari commanders refused to believe. Humans did not just survive in hostile environments, they performed better under stress. Their adrenaline system actually enhanced their physical capabilities when threatened. Pain and exhaustion made them more dangerous, not less. Admiral Chen received these reports while coordinating repairs from the makeshift command center on UES Mercy. Around her, human crew members worked with cheerful efficiency, despite injuries that would have hospitalized most galactic species for months. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had somehow survived 3 ship explosions and was now sporting cybernetic replacements for his left eye and right hand. "We have an interesting development." "Define interesting." "The Zephyrians want to help with repairs. They say their crystal harmonics can resonate with our ship hulls to seal microfractures." Chen raised an eyebrow. "They want to sing our ships back together?" "Essentially, yes, ma'am. Their engineers think they can restore structural integrity to most of our damaged vessels." "And the catch?" "They need to work inside the ships during the process. The acoustic resonance requires direct contact with the hull materials." Chen understood the problem immediately. Human ships during combat operations were full of radiation, toxic gases, and environmental hazards that would kill most galactic species in minutes. The fact that humans could survive in such conditions was already unsettling enough to their allies. "Tell them we appreciate the offer," Chen said finally, "but our ships are not safe for non-Deathworlder species during operations." The response from Ambassador Velthar came quickly. "Admiral Chen, we understand the risks, but we cannot stand by while our saviors suffer. We will take precautions." The Zephyrian repair teams arrived in environmental suits that looked like crystal bubbles. They moved through human ships like cautious visitors to an alien world, which in many ways they were. The casual way human crew members worked in conditions that required maximum protective gear terrified and amazed them in equal measure. Dr. Lithara, the Zephyrian medical officer, watched human medics treating wounded crew members and began updating her understanding of comparative biology. She observed humans receiving treatment for injuries that would have been immediately fatal to her people. then returning to duty within hours. How is this possible? She asked Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sarah Kim as they worked together in the UES Defiance sickbay. Dr. Kim looked up from where she was treating a Marine who had lost his left arm in a boarding action. The patient was conscious, alert, and complaining that the injury would interfere with his guitar playing. How is what possible? Dr. Kim asked. This warrior has lost a limb and suffered massive blood loss. By any medical standard I understand, he should be dead or comatose. Instead, he is making jokes and asking when he can return to duty. Dr. Kim smiled tiredly. Welcome to Deathworlder physiology. We evolved on a planet that spent millions of years trying to kill us. Our bodies got really good at not dying. The Zephyrian's crystal form flickered with something that might have been awe or terror. Your entire species is like this? Pretty much. Although Rodriguez there is showing off a bit. She nodded toward the Marine, who was now arm wrestling with his good hand against a crew member who had both arms in casts. I begin to understand, Dr. Lithara said quietly, why your species answered our call for help. You do not see this as a war. You see it as protecting family. Dr. Kim paused in her work and looked at the alien doctor. Now you're getting it. The Crumnary picked on someone smaller than them. Where we come from, that means it's time for the bullies to get a lesson. Outside, alarms began sounding as sensors detected the approaching Crumnary reinforcement fleet. 300 ships against 18 barely functional human vessels and their crystal-singing alien allies. Admiral Chen pulled herself into a new command chair, her injuries aching but her eyes bright with anticipation. Around her, her crew prepared for the impossible with the calm efficiency of people who had been doing the impossible their entire lives. All ships, she broadcast to her fleet, looks like we get to do this the hard way. Remember, we're not just fighting for the Zephyrians anymore. We're showing the galaxy what happens when someone threatens our friends. The Crumnari reinforcement fleet arrived in Zephyrian space with overwhelming force. 300 ships arranged in perfect battle formations, led by Admiral Krexthar aboard the massive dreadnought Dominator. This was not just a military response, it was a statement. The Crumnari Empire would not be humiliated by primitive Deathworlders. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display from her improvised command center, counting enemy vessels with the calm attention of someone calculating groceries. Her fleet of 18 damaged ships hung in space like wounded birds, most held together by Zephyrian crystal harmonics and human stubbornness. Ma'am, reported her tactical officer, they're deploying the planet killer. Chen's expression went cold. Intelligence reports had mentioned the weapon, but seeing it deployed was different. The massive device emerged from the Crumnari fleet like a mechanical moon, bristling with energy collectors and gravitational manipulators. It was designed to shatter planets by destabilizing their core structures. They plan to destroy the Zephyrian homeworld, she said quietly. Even if we surrender, they'll kill billions of civilians just to make a point. Around her, the bridge crew exchanged grim looks. They had come to help. Now they faced watching an entire species die while powerless to stop it. Admiral Krexthar's voice echoed across all frequencies. His words transmitted to every ship and monitoring station in the system. Humans of Earth, you have caused sufficient trouble. Surrender now and I will destroy only your ships. Refuse and I will crack the crystal world like an egg while you watch. Chen opened her own broadcast channel. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of every human who had ever faced impossible odds and refused to back down. Admiral Krexthar, this is Admiral Sarah Chen. I have a counter-proposal. Leave now, take your toys with you, and we'll pretend this was all a big misunderstanding. Otherwise, we're going to have to get creative. The Crumnari Admiral's laughter was harsh and metallic. Creative? You have 18 crippled ships against my 300. Your creativity will buy you nothing but a spectacular death. We'll see about that, Chen replied. Then switching to her fleet channel, she added, all ships prepare for Operation Fuck Around and Find Out. Her crew grinned despite the hopeless odds. Trust Admiral Chen to name a battle. Plan like she was ordering lunch. What happened next became known throughout galactic history as the most audacious military maneuver ever attempted. Instead of engaging the Crumnari fleet directly, the human ships began moving toward the planet killer weapon. Their course was erratic, weaving through space in patterns that made no tactical sense. Crumnari gunners tried to track them but found their targets disappearing behind debris clouds and energy interference. What are they doing? Admiral Krexthar demanded. They cannot hope to destroy the planet killer with conventional weapons. His tactical officer studied the human fleet movements with growing confusion. "Sir, their trajectory suggests they intend to, but that would be impossible." "What would be impossible?" "They appear to be planning to capture the planet killer, sir." The idea was so ridiculous that Krexthar actually paused in disbelief. The weapon was the size of a small moon, protected by shields that could deflect entire fleets and surrounded by automated defense systems. No sane species would attempt to board such a device, but as the tactical officer had noted, sanity was not a requirement for Deathworlder operations. The human attack began when the UES Mercy, officially a hospital ship, revealed that it had been extensively modified during repairs. What the Zephyrians had interpreted as medical equipment installations were actually concealed weapon systems and boarding gear. The ship accelerated directly at the planet killer's defensive perimeter, absorbing massive damage from automated weapons, while its crew worked with the focused intensity of emergency room surgeons, which, considering the ship's original purpose, was exactly what they were. "Boarding teams away," called Commander Torres as the Mercy launched every shuttle and escape pod it had, each one packed with human marines wearing improvised armor, made from ship plating and Zephyrian crystal reinforcements. The sight of medical evacuation craft being used as assault vehicles perfectly summed up human military philosophy. If something could be weaponized, it would be weaponized. The boarding teams hit the planet killer's surface while Kromnari reinforcements were still accelerating to intercept. What they found was a massive weapons platform designed to be operated by large crews in comfortable conditions. What they brought was small unit tactics developed on a world where everything was trying to kill them. Sergeant First Class Alexandra Petrov led the first team through the weapon's outer hull, using cutting torches that had been ship repair tools 20 minutes earlier. Behind her, Marines carried a mixture of captured alien weapons, improvised explosives, and tools repurposed for violence with typical human creativity. "Remember," she told her team as they breached the hull, "we're not here to destroy this thing. We're here to steal it." The plan was insane even by human standards. They intended to capture a planet-killing superweapon with 36 Marines and whatever equipment they could carry, but insanity had been working well for them so far. The interior of the planet killer was a maze of corridors designed for beings much larger than humans. The automated defenses were programmed to detect and eliminate standard galactic infantry. They were not designed to handle small, fast targets that moved through ventilation systems and attacked from impossible angles. Petrov's team split up immediately, following tactics developed for urban warfare on Earth. They moved through the weapon systems like an infection, attacking critical components while avoiding direct confrontation with the automated defenses. Meanwhile, outside the weapon, Admiral Chen coordinated the most complex space battle in human history. Her remaining ships engaged the Kromnari fleet in a running fight that used every dirty trick in the human playbook. The UES Defiant, its hull held together by force fields and prayer, executed a ramming attack on a Kromnari cruiser while broadcasting vintage rock music at maximum volume. The psychological effect on enemy crews was devastating, who fought to music. The UES Thunderbolt, still partially crippled from earlier battles, used its damaged state as camouflage to drift close to enemy ships before launching surprise attacks. The Kromnari kept dismissing it as a non-threat until it disabled 3 of their vessels with point-blank torpedo strikes, but the real masterpiece was what Sergeant Petrov's team accomplished inside the planet killer. Instead of trying to destroy the weapon's control systems, they began reprogramming them. The device had been designed to crack planets by destabilizing geological structures, but the same gravitational manipulators could be used to grab and move massive objects through space. "Control, this is Boarding Team Alpha," Petrov reported over her comm system. "We have access to the primary targeting systems. Requesting coordinates for the Kromnari command station." Admiral Chen's response was immediate and gleeful. "Confirmed, Sergeant." "Light 'em up." What followed redefined the concept of turning the tables. The massive planet-killer weapon, designed to destroy worlds, slowly rotated toward the Kromnari fleet. Its gravitational manipulators, calibrated to shatter planetary cores, focused instead on the enemy command station. Admiral Krexthar watched in growing horror as his own superweapon targeted his flagship. "This is impossible. The control systems are hard-coded against friendly fire." "Sir," his engineering officer reported with panic in his voice. The humans have somehow convinced the weapon that we are the planet it was supposed to destroy. The planet killer fired. The gravitational pulse that struck the Kromnari command station was not designed to destroy it quickly. Instead, it began tearing the massive vessel apart piece by piece, its own gravity turning against it as metal twisted and hull plates separated in slow motion. Krexthar had just enough time to send one final transmission before his ship began coming apart around him. How did they do this? Admiral Chen's response was broadcast across the entire system. We're humans. We specialize in aggressive problem solving. The sight of their ultimate weapon being turned against them broke the Kromnari fleet's morale completely. Ships began surrendering individually, their crews unwilling to face an enemy that could steal planet-killing weapons and use them for target practice. Within 6 hours, the most powerful Kromnari invasion force in centuries had surrendered to 18 damaged human ships and a bunch of crystal beings who sang to fix things. The aftermath was both celebration and diplomatic crisis. The Zephyrians were safe, but the galaxy now had to deal with the reality that a species of Deathworld survivors had just announced themselves as a major power in the most dramatic way possible. Ambassador Felthar found Admiral Chen in the medical bay of the UES Mercy 3 days later. She was finally allowing doctors to treat her injuries properly, though she kept trying to get back to work. Admiral, Felthar said, his crystal form shimmering with gratitude. How can we ever repay what you have done for us? Chen looked up from the medical report she was reviewing despite doctor's orders. Just remember this favor next time someone needs help. Oh, and your crystal harmonics would make amazing music with our instruments. Maybe we can jam sometime?